in the preceding presentation discussed the concerns of design in an organization and looked at the generic concerns in organizational variables, human variables, in the environment, in manager's role and function, and in each case looked at the topic from the prism of design concerns. We concluded the presentation through a reference to concerns of organization design, and we looked at what are some of the common options available before we can sensibly exercise a choice or indeed develop our own options of organization design. I propose to take this discussion further in understanding issues of design so far as jobs are concerned and see what it has to do with organizational effectiveness. First, we need to understand what is a job. Job is a group of major activities assigned to an individual. For example, if you are a haul truck driver, it is your job to pick up the material on the truck, it is your job to drive it and deliver the material on it safely to its destination. If that is to be done, you need certain skills and you need certain clustering of tasks. The example in the preceding presentation of the post office was again a good example of a job. A job can be divided into functional units called duties or what can be called tasks. These are synonymous words and the semantics on this is not standardized. Some call it tasks, other call it duties and still others call it activities. But job design determines the way work is organized and performed, and this is the important thing to remember. Job design determines the way work is organized and performed. The example of the post office should forever be kept in mind, so that you are able to understand how performance has to do with the clustering of the tasks. What is the process of the job design? Process of the job design goes through at least 4 stages and then it has to be linked to the benefits it brings to the organization. If we are to look at the process of job design, one has to be clear about the work. One has to identify what is the work to be done. In the illustration I gave to you, the job to be done was to send 2 registered letters. The work was divided into 4 segments: getting information, weighing the envelopes, stamp vending and given a registration slip for the envelopes received. This work will have to be done in a process, in other words a sequence. You cannot issue a receipt without the payment made, and the payment made would be symbolized by the stamps bought, and you cannot have stamps being bought unless the quantum of stamps being bought, which has a correlation to the revenue which accrues to the government for carrying the letter, which in turn is a factor of weighing it. Therefore, process is sequenced. Work is to identify what is the task to be done. The process is to clarify how the job will be done. The requirements are identify the skills, knowledge and competencies required to perform the job, and the contribution is how goal completion of work contributes to achieving organizational goals. So, be it work, be it processes, they have a set of requirements which could be called precursor activities. You cannot handle the process, you can't do the work unless you have identified the skills. This concept is central to the understanding of effectiveness, namely listing of the skills for doing a job. People who do not understand this will perform the cardinal error of putting a person on the task and hoping that he will learn on the job, a palpably erroneous assumption, because people do not always learn by being put on the job, and this has certainly nothing to do with social welfare. In developed and mature societies, social welfare has always been delinked from performance, because performance has to do with productivity, productivity has to do with profits, and if the profits do not come, no social objective can ever be met. Therefore, social objectives are one cluster of issues, productivity and profitability are another set of issues, and they cannot be mixed. Need to emphasize the skills. A person is hired, as has been maintained in the presentation, not because of any other factor, but the skills he carries, and so long as his skills are relevant, he will stay in employment. Skills would lead to a knowledge and competency required to perform the work. So, there is a critical symbiotic linkage between skills and competencies, and the outcome has to be performance. We have referred to performance in the previous presentation, where we have said that it is one of the social variables. The contribution is to the completion of work and contribution to achieving the organizational goals. Therefore, this presentation, this slide should be able to show to you a process flow, should be able to demonstrate to you the linkages between work, process, requirements and contributions, which is the raison d'etre for any design activity. The benefits of job design are that it brings clarity in the role. What am I supposed to do? And unless there is clarity on the role, there will be job overlap. Job overlap would mean that there should be a clear-cut definition of the tasks the different persons will carry out, and for the tasks assigned to them, they must bear the responsibility, and the requirement therefore reduces the work conflict. In an industrial or a manufacturing situation, it is important that there be no work conflict, because if there is work conflict, then there will be work disruption, the quality will deteriorate, and most disastrous of all, certain stages may be skipped, and that is not a risk which can ever be taken. A good job design finally results in greater organizational effectiveness and efficiency and better employee performance. This is a key sentence, and it needs to be noted. It is such a key sentence that we have an entire topic devoted to efficiency and effectiveness. Excellence then follows. So, job design is the delivery mechanism which channelizes performance to make a work system be effective. And what is an effective work system? It has to be measured against results. How do you measure against results? You measure against results by measurement across the parameters which were identified before the work began and with reference to the standards that were set before the work was undertaken. Therefore, both the parameters and the standards have to be known to the performer, otherwise it does not work, which leads to concerns of planning, which will be of course touched upon as we go along. Job design therefore is not an optional extra. Job design is an integral part of functioning of jobs, and job design is an essential part of organizational effectiveness. The benefits to the organization would be improvement in productivity and efficiency. This is a simple derivative from the observations I have been making. Reduction in staff supervision, monitoring and control, because staff supervision must definitely be limited. Staff supervision cannot be made as an instrument of prodding to get the job done. If staff supervision is reduced to prodding to get a job done, then that I think is a poor use of a supervisor. If the people who are supposed to do the tasks are not self-generating, are not self-motivated, then the prodding and the exhortations of the supervisors are not likely to yield many results. The monitoring and control mechanism again has to be on the basis of results. Monitoring cannot be a checking on whether the task has been done or not. That should be an axiomatic element of a task allocation. If you are allotted a task, you are supposed to complete it. When you complete the task, then you will be measured against efficiency, and you will be measured against the actual task accomplished and not the if at all the task has been done. So, the nature of monitoring has to be understood, and control here is supposed to be an element of keeping the system goal directed. This is a bit of a thermodynamic model. Control is not just a negation. Control here can also be an accelerator. It is supposed to calibrate speed to the correct point, calibrate results with the standards in mind, so that at the end of the day, when tasks are accomplished and the productivity and the results measured, they match the standards that were set. So, the word control here is somewhat different to the normal parlance of control in everyday language, and that finally brings us to greater effectiveness of work teams. Hardly anything ever gets done alone. A truism which most people know, but not all believe in operational terms. If you are working in a team, there cannot possibly be any one-upmanship, because if you are doing the task better than what the next person after you is doing in terms of his task accomplishment, then there will be a clear quality mismatch. And if there is a quality mismatch between what person X did and what person Y did, then the mismatch will affect the overall quality of the work completed. So, evenness of work accomplishment is essential for quality outcomes, which is why working in teams requires creating even standards of work all around and to make sure that people are in sync with each other before movement to the next level of growth can take place. The benefits to the organization when this happens, and please link it up with the slide which I just showed to you, which has to do with greater effectiveness and work teams, and try to imagine the benefits to the organization. How will they come? They will come through allocation of skilled, flexible, responsive workforce to meet work requirements. In other words, there is an operational component of job design, namely job design is merely the receptacle of proper allocation of skills, proper allocation of responsive manpower. With only one touchstone does it meet the work requirements. There will be occasions where the skill pool available with an individual may not be up to the mark of work discharge. If the skill pool is not equivalent to the work discharged, then it is important that the focus should be on training programs to optimize the value of training investment. Training and development becomes therefore an essential ingredient of matching the skill requirements with the skill availability. In other words, standards minus actual is the training need identification. Job design helps to create the underpinning requirement of a training intervention. Better talent management and career management is an essential outcome of job design, and this, as you see, is being explained to you in what are the benefits to the organization if proper job design is carried out. Once there is better talent management and better career management, then safe and healthy work conditions emerge. This has an effect on improvement of employee attraction, involvement and retention. One of the current problems which many organizations face is the problem of retrenchment. Now, if there is a problem of retrenchment, it is not just a factor of people wanting better salaries, it can also be a factor of job dissatisfaction. Job dissatisfaction may be a factor of underutilization. Job dissatisfaction may be a factor of a mismatch between what is being demanded of the job and what is the skill available with the individual. If the skill available with the individual is less, he is likely to feel frustrated. If the skill available with the individual is high and the job demand is low, therefore, the fit is poor, he may still go out. But if you have proper job designs which lead to proper learning and development interventions, then it is obvious that you would have better employee retention, and the costs of hiring being what they are, employee retention is a critical element of profitability of the overall organization. This slide lists to you the various benefits of good job design for the individual and the employee. In the previous slide, we had shown to you the benefits to the organization. Benefits to the employees are greater clarity of work role, purpose and accountabilities, which means the issues of friction are reduced if you are clear on the work role, if you are clear for the purpose, and if you are clear on accountabilities, then there will be organizational peace. Putting it simply, it is essential to realize that work performance requires clear job descriptions. It is another matter that there are several organizations which do not have a written job description. Sometimes one can manage without it, but in many cases it creates a problem. A clear job description would have a statement of the objectives of the organization. A clear job description would have the breakup of the tasks written down very briefly in a set of verbs, doing words. A job description would have also the list of resources available for job discharge. And most of all, a job description would have a situation where the support and linkages from preceding jobs and the sequential jobs which follow would be clear, which means it would list the tasks receivable at that job design and the tasks deliverable by that job design, giving tremendous clarity to what will be done on that job design, and therefore, the person discharging that job is not only at peace as to why he is to do it, but also what he is to do, and indeed if he is properly trained, how he is to do it. To go back to the benefits of the employees, beyond greater clarity of work role, purpose and accountabilities, it helps shared design of work expectations with supervisor. So, supervision becomes a relatively less painful process, and there is a joy in work discharge, there is a joy in getting around with the task. It leads to team cohesion as roles, relationships and resources are clearly defined. If roles, relationships and resources are clearly defined, then it holds to reason that the possibility of teamwork is higher. Later on in the course, we will be talking of leadership and team development also. But talking of leadership and team development, which really comes in the third module, one has to be clear that the underpinning of teams is integrated job designs, which is why the reference here team cohesion as roles, relationships and resources are clearly defined, and the vehicle for doing this would be job description. There are varied work challenges, opportunities to develop work skills, etc. The varied work challenges often made the task of job accomplishment a little more complex than it would normally be. If there were straightforward work propositions and challenges, then of course, if there are straightforward challenges, then there is no challenge. But the very fact that there are challenges and varied work situations require a certain orientation in certain potential skills being available should the job discharge require. Therefore, the supervisory function must provide opportunities to develop work skills. Targeted training to meet current and future job needs has already been elaborated in the earlier descriptions, and therefore, the match between job requirements and the skill availability cannot be permitted to continue. Better career pathways and developmental opportunities then emerge. Safer and healthier workplace is the result, not to forget the fact that work life balance is easier to achieve because this balanced work life tends to impact a balanced domestic life, and for performance at work it is just as important to have balance with the domestic demands and the domestic performance. Increased job satisfaction and engagement is the outcome. It is obvious therefore, that design issues are the central assumptions on which effectiveness would work. A quick grasp of the areas where job design is critical would be helpful. Job design would be critical in job evaluation, especially for companies. The job with other jobs in an organization will determine the appropriate grade in which the organizational results are to be placed. If you do not do job evaluation, then clearly you can't do organizational evaluation, and if you can't do organizational evaluation, you are not in a position to assess the returns on income, and if you are not in a position to assess the return on investment, the return on whatever you have put in, then the factor of overall growth of the organization becomes dubious. Job evaluation is one outcome which we have of the activity of job design, and I was telling you that there is recruitment and selection, which will be a factor of the job design, because how do you recruit unless you are clear on the job design? How do you recruit unless you have identified the job requirements, which will lead to the identification of the selection criteria? How do you write the job advertisements unless your job descriptions are clear? How do you interview? How do you ask questions at the interview unless you are clear on the job design? And how do you access the best applicant for the job? And believe me, if you do not access the best applicant for the job, you are in trouble, because the tasks will not get done, and you enter a spiral where tasks incomplete create poor products. Creating poor products reduces sales, reducing sales reduces income, reduces accruals, reduction of income and accruals creates issues of the returns. Therefore, career planning and development is embedded in proper job design. The information helps staff to understand the requirements of their job, their role. They gain insight into the requirements of other roles in the organization and identify the capabilities needed for their own chosen career path. The proposition being put across to you is, both in short term terms and long term concerns, it is important to have job design, because job design then links up with performance management, reward and recognition, and workforce planning. Let us walk through each one of them clearly. Performance management will only happen if the roles are clear, will only happen when the understanding of the managers and the staff are shared on what the job requirements are. The same applies to reward and recognition. Clearly defined capabilities, benchmarks, the standards to be achieved to gain recognition. To recognize work performance and say whether it is below expectations, as per expectations, above expectations, will be again rooted in job design. One of the advantages which then come out of this kind of work design is workforce planning. When aggregated, all individual roles in the organization should meet the organization's capability needs. And now, this sentence needs to be grasped very carefully. When aggregated, that is, when all jobs are aggregated through a cohesive flow of work across different job designs, then we have a situation where all job designs are aggregated. Once this happens, all the individual roles in the organization should meet the organization's capability needs. Hence, any surplus, any slack, any redundancy will get identified and would lead to better performance parameters. It also enables better work allocation planning, better ensuring of workforce safety, and better workforce equity and diversity. If you go back to the slide I presented for your understanding of job design, recall the circle. Inside the circle there were 4 pillars. Outside the circle there was the environment, and we talked of industrial relations, we talked of technology, and you, I am sure, remember the design. Work allocation planning means that manager can ensure that work relates to organization's core business and is correctly allocated, because that is the only way the requirements of the organization will get converted into the practices of the organization, and a match will be created between what the organization needs and what the organization produces, taken together with what the environment is willing to pay for. Work allocation planning is therefore a central management activity. Go back to the descriptions we had of managerial role and function. There were 5 integrative mechanisms shown there, and work allocation planning is clearly one of the central instrumentalities of putting together organizational variables with social variables. There are 2 factors of employee welfare, both internal to the organization, endogenous is the word many people use, and exogenous to the organization. Progressively, it is being realized that all workforce, all organizations are embedded in an environmental context. Now, if they are all embedded in an environmental context, then workforce must have equity and diversity. If the environment has diversity as a defining characteristic of the ingredients, you have definite ethnic groups, you have identifiable anthropological cultural patterns, then this will permeate the organization, and there will be a legitimate aspiration on the part of diverse groups to get access to work channels. And one of the myths which should not even be brought in the domain of debate is that talent has an ethnic divide or dimension. There is no such thing. Human nature, human talent, human skills are globally the same. Ethnic characteristics are cultural paradigms, the divisions which come out of certain growth features of the Homo sapiens body, certain biological factors, but it has got nothing to do with being a repertoire of talent. That diversity has a huge leavening effect on work performance. In fact, even in composition of groups, it has been found that if there are people with diverse backgrounds brought in, it enriches the quality of discussion and performance, because people are carrying with them different perspectives which mutually interact and mutually enrich. Hence, it is that job design helps to put certain parameters onto workforce equity and enables workforce diversity to be converted into productive results. The relationship between workforce equity and productivity is very simply this. It has an industrial relations dimension, it has an interactory relationship which leads to richness dimension, and above all it creates the social piece which is bound to have as one of its defining characteristics access to workforce channels, therefore, channels of employment, therefore, channels of livelihood. To carry the discussion further, I think it is important to realize when a job design exercise should be conducted. Here is a listing of 5 parameters which you may wish to look at. Organization goes for technology upgradation, advancement or adoption, then job design needs to be carried out. Unless you have carried out job design exercise, the organization cannot go for technology upgradation, cannot go for technology advancement or technology adoption. That technology has to be periodically phased out, that technology has to be periodically upscaled, that technology has periodically to be renewed, because obsolescence of technology leads to obsolescence of productivity factors is a truism. Therefore, if an organization is going in for technology upgradation and technology advancement is such a repetitive affair, such a continuing affair, I am of the view that it should also be recognized that job design is a requirement which is an inherent part of organizational life. If an organization goes for restructuring or re-engineering to improve operational efficiencies, then again job design is required. In fact, the truth is job design is a continuous requirement, but then it becomes more poignant, more powerful in certain situations, and this slide lists the 5 conditions under which job design is a repeated need. So, I was telling you that if an organization goes for restructuring or re-engineering to improve operational efficiencies, job design must be done. Organization goes for benchmarking and implements better work practices. To implement better work practices, again a job design effort has to be carried out. The organization goes for change in objectives, targets, structures, operations and individuals, and believe me you, so far as this statement is concerned, you can't even begin work, to repeat, you can't even begin work if you are going in for a change in objectives, targets, structures, operations and individuals, if you do not have an input of job design. And finally, organization recognizes the emergence of new profession and creates positions for the same. In other words, professions die, they are phased out, new ones emerge, and that is at the bottom of many organizational changes. For example, the events recently concluded of phasing out telegraph as a mode of communication underscores the death not only of a technology, but also the death of a profession which was devoted to operating that technology. That would require redeployment, that would require a redesign of organizations, and therefore, essentially it would be a question of redoing of the job design. To take the discussion further, what are the stages in performing the job design? 5 stages have been suggested in performing job designs. First is seek information about the job evaluation process. Second, seek information about the positions. Third, analyze the positions. Fourth, create a position description. 5, classify and grade the positions. Now, that is more simply stated than explained. Let us try to go through all the 5 and see what is meant. Presumably, if you are performing a job design exercise, then you have a live organization which is functioning. If there is a live organization which is functioning, then you have to seek information about the job evaluation process. How do you enter the job evaluation process? Very simply, begin by taking a look at the rejection rate. Take a look at the faults that were discovered. Take a look at the success rate and find out which market segmentation really mopped up those products and get their preferences. It is going to be a mix of concerns being put together, of an analysis of the deficiencies and the success factors, which will create a job evaluation process. And as you cover the organization with a job evaluation exercise, you are seeking information on what each one's job is, and you are seeking information on what each one's skills are. You will therefore be also in a position to know what the gaps are, and you would be able to know what would have been the job design if these deficiencies were not to occur, and what would be the job design if those success factors would need to be stabilized. Therefore, this is a bit of a reverse engineering from the results to the actual analysis of the jobs, beginning with job evaluation and ending up with task identification. The second suggestion there had to do with collecting information about the positions. What do you collect information about? You collect information about its ability to justify its existence. What would happen if that job position was totally abolished? And if there is no tangible results, well, then there is time for you to ask whether that job should exist at all or not. If that job does not exist, needn't exist, does not help take forward the organizational objectives, then abolish the job, but collect information about the position before taking a position with a reference to the job. That having been done, find out how it actually goes about. Once you have got the what, the why and the how, analyze the position in terms of breaking it down to its elements. Once you have decomposed it to its elements, link up the various elements to create the design, and that would be tantamounting to creating a position description. This position description would be more scientific than it was when you began the process, because a whole scientific methodology has been adopted in getting to the position description. After you have got the position description, classify and grade the position. Your effort to classify and grade the position will make job design come alive and become a factor of the effectiveness parameter. There are two stages which I would like to draw your attention to in terms of seeking information about the job design and its concomitant activity. If you seek information about the job design, then the following steps and activities may be useful. Check out whether the organization has any accredited job evaluation process. Many organizations have a job evaluation process, may not be labeled as such, but the very fact that there is an honorarium given, there is a compensation given, there is a salary given, means that there is some underpinning job evaluation. the HR department should be able to give information about the processes adopted for a particular job. If the HR department gives information about the processes adopted for a particular job, it is possible to scientifically analyze its worth by assigning values. Government agencies, acts, circulars classify the grade different positions and provide useful information for job design. In fact, even government departments have the use of the scalar principle, and then they talk of what level the job is actually at, which shows what is the sophistication of the level of skill required in that job. Any organizations in different sectors also help job evaluation policy and provide information on particular position, because you get a general societal rating for a given position. For example, what should be the wages of a teacher? There has to be a job evaluation policy. How do you fix the salary of a teacher? How do you fix the salary of a civil servant? How do you fix the salary of an assistant? Obviously, there has to be a job evaluation policy and an evaluation of the contribution of that profession, that level, to a given outcome. Why should the salary of a professor be different to that of an associate professor, be different to that of an assistant professor? There is a reasoning behind it, not just in teaching. Why should the salary of under secretary be different from a deputy secretary, be different from a joint secretary, be different from an additional secretary, be different from a secretary? Unless there is job evaluation and you are seeking information about the job design, you will not be able to answer that question. And finally, universities also formulate policies and procedures for job evaluation, which means you can use knowledge management for job evaluation processes, but that is a different story altogether. When you collect information about the position, there are various techniques which can be used to do so. This is not the best place to get into the different techniques, but I will confine myself merely to giving certain illustrative references, so that you know what are some of the ways in which can be done. And one of them is standard questionnaire. Develop a standard questionnaire as a basis for collecting information on position to be analyzed. Questionnaire techniques are very useful in job analysis. This helps in obtaining information about the skills, responsibilities, decision making, complexity and teamwork. Now, if you have got information about the position, you can carry out an analysis and result in better job design. So, let me repeat, this helps in obtaining information about skills, responsibilities, decision making, complexity and teamwork. What does standard questionnaire with reference to collecting information about the position? The units of competencies, develop units of competencies for particular jobs, which can assist in defining the tasks, skills and knowledge for particular activities. Remember, knowledge is as important as skills. Skills and knowledge are the two wheels on which a task accomplishment is done. We have not talked much about knowledge yet, because the assumption has been that skill repertoire by definition acquires a knowledge wherewithal. The level in competency standards give some indication of the complexity of the tasks. Therefore, skill analysis is the essence of the matter. Skill audit is to be conducted to define positions, dimensions, how competencies relate to particular positions, complete the profile, carry out a skill audit, you have a job design, and you are on the road somewhere, not only to have organizational efficiency, but also to be able to deliver results from the resources which have been made available to you.